Now, Ecuador's government has just agreed to repeal a law that ended decades-old fuel subsidies after holding talks with indigenous leaders. Earlier, demonstrators, angry at the rise in fuel prices, attacked government buildings and burnt media offices. They were defying a government-imposed curfew in the capital, Quito. Protests first began nearly 2 weeks ago. Well, Manuel Rapalo joins us live now from Quito. Manuel, so just bring us up to date on what's been agreed between both sides.
Well, there are celebrations taking place on the streets of Quito right now. If you can hear behind me, there's fireworks going on, cars honking their horns, people celebrating what's been deemed an agreement finally between a confederation of indigenous communities from across the country that have been protesting for over a week, calling on the government to reverse course on a economic policy that sought to end decades-long fuel subsidies, an austerity program that the government that many saw as being damaging for the country, and they seem to have managed to come up with an agreement with the government where that's exactly what they're going to get. The government has decided to abandon this policy measure and instead form a commission, an inclusive commission that takes into account the voices and participation of indigenous leaders to find not only a solution out of this crisis, but an economic policy that's beneficial to all sectors of society. So this is something that we personally were not expecting to be reporting this evening, given what we saw take place earlier today, a continuation of clashes between demonstrators and protesters, people in the streets saying that they'd lost confidence in the government, lost confidence in the president, calling on the resignation of President Lenin Moreno. So this is certainly good news, and hopefully it means a lasting peace for the streets of Quito and the rest of the country.
Yeah, and I was just about to ask you, Manuel, so where does this then leave the curfew and the other restrictions placed against the protesters?
Well, on Saturday, that curfew was announced nationwide. On Sunday morning, that curfew was lifted partially for the country, except for one sector of Quito, specifically the areas where many of the demonstrators were staying, were sleeping. Now, we should mention, however, that despite this curfew, a lot of people were still defying the curfew. A lot of demonstrators were still taking to the streets, still clashing with police into the night. That appears to be over. But we should mention that indigenous leaders have condemned the heavy crackdown, the repression against peaceful protesters by authorities here in Quito. They cited a few statistics here. More than 2,000 people have been wounded since these clashes broke out more than a week ago. 10 people have been killed, unfortunately, since the start of the unrest here in the country's capital, and more than 1,000 people have been arrested. So there's still many things that need to be ironed out. There's still calls for justice for the people that have been killed. There's still calls for an investigation into those who have been wounded, including members of the press. So while there is a lot of optimism and a lot of hope that this could mean a lasting peace, there are still many things that need to be ironed out before people can safely say that calm and peace has returned to the streets of Quito.
All right, Manuel Rapalo there in the Ecuadorian capital. Manuel, thank you.